Welcome back, my beautiful fashionistas. Hope you're all doing great. So today for this dress, we are starting off right away, and I've made some lines already. This is the starting point. Up there, I've left half an inch as the joining allowance. From the top there, I went down to 6.5 inches. I want the bustier to start at 7 inches, so I need half an inch as the sewing allowance. Then at 10-inch mark I have the bust line, then under bust at the 13-inch mark for this person, the waistline at 16-inch mark, and the hip line at the 24-inch mark. So those are the lines that we are going to work with for the front piece of this dress. Guys, it's going to be a dress, though my pattern is short. I'll just elongate it when I'm cutting at the fabric. So this is the center front. This center front will be on fold. So moving on, I'm going to mark 3 inches as the neck width and the half of the shoulder measurement, which is 7.5 in this case. I'm not adding allowance. So at that 7.5 inch, I'm going down by 1 inch to make a shoulder slant, as you see, that connects to the neckline width, like that, just as you see. And for the neckline depth for the front piece, I'm going to work with 3.5 inches, like that. And I want to use a round neckline, simply like this. So right away, I love adding the half an inch as the joining allowance along the shoulder here, so that I don't forget. So guys, moving on along this line where it's kind of the upper bust, where the bustier will start from, I'm just going to mark 3.5 inches, and you can either mark at 4 inches or even at 3 inches, but I'm marking 3.5 inches. And since this is a sleeveless top, I'm also going to mark the 3.5 inches along the shoulder slant here, and then connect those 2 points to mark the halter design that we are achieving today. So this is the halter design. At this point, if you don't want the bustier, you can even stop there and just continue with the usual markings of the dress. So for the nipple to nipple measurement that I'm working with, which is 8 inches, half of it is 4 inches, and right away I added half an inch for the joining allowance of this dart. But guys, since we are achieving a bustier and I don't want to shorten my center front piece, I added about 1.5 inches, which ended up being a little bit excess. I think I would have added 1 inch. So because of this halter design, I'm just going to mark the 4.5 inches plus about 1.5 inches, though I would have reduced it by at least half an inch. So I'm going to mark that measurement on all these lines, so that I form a straight line where I'm going to manipulate the bustier dart from. So I'm connecting my points like this from the 6.5 inch mark where the bustier will start from up to where the dress will end. So now guys, coming here at the under bust line, I'm going to mark inch on either sides of this line that I've marked, just 1 inch along the under bust line, the waistline and the hip line, up to where the full length of the dress will stop. And then I'm going to connect these points from the full length coming up to the under bust. And also up here, let me first connect my lines up to the under bust like this. And guys, now up here also where the bustier will start from, I'm marking 1 inch on either side, and from the under bust passing through the bust point, it's going to be a curve up there where our bustier will start from. Some people call it the bustier, but I love calling it Bustier. I'm not American. So it goes like that. And even this side, like this, connecting those points with a curve, guys, so that your bust can be protruding very well. So that's it. So guys, I'm using a kind of a pen at this point, but after all the markings I'll use a marker so that I show you every wanted part. But at this point, let us first roll with a pen. So guys, from here, from the 1 inch along the that we went down with along the shoulder, coming down by 7 inches. Usually I use 8 inches, but in this case I used 7 inches for the chest line, like where we carved the armhole from. At this point I used 7 inches. I went up by 1 inch, including the sewing allowance. So along this chest line, I'm just going to mark a quarter of the bust measurement, which is 9 inches in this case. Then I add this dart intake that we used. I add it here, and then I add the sewing allowance, that is for the dart and the side seam allowances. So I'm going to connect from that chest line that we formed up to where this that manipulation, or where that is, just simply as you see there. So continuing, I'm going also to mark a quarter of the waist measurement again, plus the 2 inches that intake along that line, and that seam allowance, and also the side seam allowance. So I'm going to do the same even at the hip line. Hip measurement divided by 4 plus the dart intake plus the sewing allowances, that is the dart allowance and the side seam allowance. So guys, at this point I'm just going to connect my points like this, simply like this. So I'm now using a marker so that I show you all the wanted parts. So just follow through as we do everything. So where you see the blue marker, that is where we're going to also cut to form our bustier halter neck design dress, like that. So next we just cut through to get our front pieces. So guys, even before cutting, just go on and cross-check your measurements so that you get something perfect for you, and if needed, please add seam allowances right away. So these are my front pieces, and now I'm just labeling them. We will need 2 side pieces and 1 middle piece since it is on fold. So now for the back, this is my pattern paper. At the back, it can either be splitted into 2 or it can be on fold also, depending on where your zipper will be. If your zipper will be at the side, you put your center back on fold. So guys, I'm starting off by marking the zipper allowance because I'll be using a zipper. That is the zipper allowance of 1 inch, and I have my lines already marked. On top here, still as we did for the front, I'm marking 3 inches neck width, but the back neck depth is 1 inch, and I'm going to mark the 7.5 going down by 1 inch for the shoulder slant, and then connect like that. and then also shape out the neckline. It is round neckline like that. It goes into the zipper allowance also. So guys, remember here for the front we marked 3.5, even here I'm marking 3.5, even along the 6-inch mark line, and then connect for the halter design. And that is not a constant, it just depends on you. So guys, after this 1-inch shoulder slant, I'm going down by 7 inches. Remember, that's what we did even for the front, to mark the chest line there. And now along this chest line, I'm just marking now the nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2 plus 1/2 inch joining allowance. So, and then connect a line, and I'm going to come here along the waistline and mark 1/2 inch on either side. So for the back, it's not a bustier or a bustier, it's just simple usual dart that we mark, and I'm going to connect these points. So at the hip line, if you want, you can leave the 1/2 inch on either side and just consider that only along the waistline, but in this case I considered 1/2 inch on all those points below the bust line. So remember, the back dart always ends 1 inch above the bust line, so that is where I've stopped it, like that's where it has stopped in this case. So now I'm just going to mark 1/4 of the bust measurement, which is 9 inches, plus just the 2 inches that I'm considering in this case for the side seam allowance, and now connect from the halter neck design to the side along the chest line, simply like that. So I'm going to do the same, 1/4 of the waist measurement plus the dart intake of 1 inch in this case, and then the side seam allowances and dart allowance, sewing allowance. So I do the same even at the hip line. So guys, that is what we have, but I've just changed my mind. I want this dart to go up here where the halter neck design stops. So when I just marked 1/4 inches on either sides of this dart line that we marked earlier on, and I have to add that allowance at the side seam allowance because we've reduced it. So now guys, I'm just going to connect from that line, going down to the waistline like that. Remember, we've marked 1/4 inch besides that line. So now we've changed that, but we have to add it at the side. We have to add that allowance at the side. So also the last thing that we are doing here is just to mark 1/2 inch along the waistline, just to avoid the zipper bulge. And from that waistline, I'm going down to the hip line, from that 1/2 inch, marking like this. And from this waistline still, I'm going up here where the neckline depth is. So the 1/2 inch is only along the waistline, and after now we can mark with a blue pen all the necessary parts that we need and show where we're going to cut from. So this is how it is. This is the back. By the way, if you don't want that manipulation of the bustier or the bustier, you can just use this method that we've used that for the back part of this dress, and just consider that to make such a halter neck design dress instead of going through all the bustier process. So guys, I cut out all the necessary pieces. So I forgot to cut out that part of this piece where you see B2, that where that line is, I was supposed to cut it off. I forgot to do that here, but I remembered when I was cutting my fabric pieces, and I did that. So guys, watch out for part 2 where I show you the sewing part of this video. And thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in that next video. Don't forget to subscribe to Yvonne Winifred UG. See you then.